Are you ready for your next studio guitar session? Here are some tips to make sure that you're fully prepared. While some of the fun in the studio is experimentation, you should make as many decisions beforehand as you can. These decisions will help you save a lot of money and time in the studio. Not all of these are necessary, but do as many of them as you can. 8 tips for success for your next studio guitar session. Number 1, change all of your strings on your guitars the week of the session. It also helps to clean your pots or the potentiometers to make sure there's no crackly or noisy sounds coming out of your guitar. If you can give the guitar a full setup, that would be ideal. And new strings are naturally brighter, so they'll cut through the mix better than strings that you've had on for 6 months or even more. Not to mention they'll stay in tune. So change your guitar strings and set up your guitar if you can. Number 2, get your amps serviced. Change the tubes, get the amp biased. You might not even realize how bad your amp sounds until you change the tubes and you notice how good it sounds. A freshly serviced amp will sound awesome. I just changed the tubes on my Vox after maybe 2 years and I was blown away. Number 3, create a spreadsheet of all the tracks that you're going to be recording for each song. You might have stereo acoustic guitars for each chorus. Maybe you have a clean electric guitar for the verse. Maybe you have heavier stereo electric guitars during the chorus. You're probably going to have to overdub solo. So think of all these things and write them down in a spreadsheet. Figure out which amps and pedals and guitars you're using for each take. And if you're doing stereo electric guitar stuff at any point during the song, it helps to use a different guitar and a different amp for each of those tracks so that they sound separated. If you use the same Les Paul onto the same Marshall for both sides, you can do that, but they'll sound so similar to each other that the mixing engineer is going to have to do some tricks in order to separate them a bit. Whereas if you do it in the first place, then they'll naturally sound different. The more of this stuff you do, the more time and money you will save in the studio. Number 4, bring a variety of guitar picks to the session. You might typically use the same kind of pick whenever you're doing a live performance, but when you're recording, thinner and thicker picks are going to have a big difference on your tone. When I'm recording a strumming acoustic guitar part, I really prefer to use a thin pick because you get more attack to it. If I'm doing a guitar solo on electric, I prefer a thicker pick. That's just based on my playing. You'll have headphones in the studio, so bring a handful of picks, try playing your guitar with a few different picks, and see which one sounds best in your ears. You might be surprised at how big of a difference it makes. Number 5, practice all of your parts until you cannot make any mistakes. If this means that you have to make some parts a little easier, that's fine. You really want to nail it in the studio. If it takes you 30 takes to get a guitar solo recorded, then that solo is probably too hard for you. Practice enough that you can do it, and if you can't do it after that, then you might need to simplify some things. I usually prefer to write all of my solos before I go into the studio, but you might want to experiment, especially if you're like a blues or jazz player. You might want to improvise several takes and then take the one that you like best. Number 6, if possible, separate your pedals. Pedal boards are great for live situations, but the more inactive pedals you're running through, the weaker the signal is going to be, and it's just not going to sound as good as if you plugged straight into the amp, or if you plug like guitar into the one pedal that you're using and then into the amp. Even if the pedals are true bypass, they will still have some effect on the tone. Running through 10 inactive pedals will hinder your sound quite a bit. So whenever possible, plug directly into the amp, or plug only into the pedals that you're actively using. The more wires there are, the more chance of noise there is. Number 7, practice and discuss all parts with your band or the people you're playing with in the studio. It's important for the band to line up on specific hits and rhythms. Make sure you discuss these things beforehand with the others. And if you're playing with a keyboard player, make sure that you aren't stepping on each other tone-wise and range-wise. So like an electric guitar might have a similar tone to an organ, say. Make sure you're like an octave away from each other or whatever it is so that you don't sound too similar. And number 8, warm up the day of the session. I personally would play through all the main parts of the songs, the solos, and you could do some typical finger exercises to get the juices flowing. Whatever it is that you do to warm up, I would do that the day of the recording. Recording in the studio is one of the most rewarding experiences you can have as a musician. Just to see your song come to life from a mere idea that you had It's really a special thing. If you're a hired gun for the session, your professionalism and preparedness will ensure that you get the call the next time around. A lot of studio work is just knowing people. So if you record with somebody, impress them, and they'll be calling you again. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to subscribe and like, and we'll see you in the next one.